The Atlantic Coast Pipeline is a proposed pipeline being backed by four companies: Dominion Energy, Duke Energy, Southern Company Gas, and Piedmont Natural Gas. To introduce the pipeline is Aaron Ruby, Media Relations Manager at Dominion Energy.
All right, so the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is a proposed 600-mile underground natural gas transmission pipeline. It's going to transport clean-burning natural gas from the producing regions of north central West Virginia to communities across Virginia, including down into Hampton Roads and the Tidewater region, as well as many communities down in North Carolina. All of our customers that will be taking gas off of the pipeline are public utilities, electric utilities and natural gas utilities. They provide electricity, home heating, and power to homes and local businesses all across Virginia and North Carolina. So all of the gas that's transported through the pipeline is going to be used by public utilities to generate cleaner electricity, to provide affordable home heating, and power for local businesses.
Though there is major support for the pipeline, especially in Hampton Roads, there is a definitive and growing opposition to it. One of the places most affected by the pipeline is the Appalachian Mountains near Wintergreen because of the tourism industry. Nelson County, one of those affected areas, created an interest group called Friends of Nelson County in opposition. This opposition seems to transcend party lines and socioeconomic class. Some of the major concerns being raised are loss of private property via eminent domain, the environment, and the natural peace and beauty that attracts tourists. Opposition for this pipeline is statewide and grows as construction seems more viable. This documentary focuses on the area near Nelson County because of the virulent effects it will have directly on the community. I chose this topic to raise awareness about a local issue that not many people know about. I asked some of my classmates what they knew about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and these were their responses.
I honestly know that it exists. I don't really know, I know that it's a problem and that it's come up recently as being a problem, but I don't know why it is a problem or what can be done to fix it.
Sounds like something with gas, of course, that people, try to use for their cars and stuff. I don't know. I'm not so sure.
Not too much. All I know is that it would be obstructing a lot of nature, and personally, I like going on some nature hikes every now and then, so it would kind of ruin that experience for me.
I know absolutely nothing about that.
It's on the Atlantic coast. It's a pipeline. Nothing else.
I don't really know a whole lot about it.
I actually don't know anything about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline other than what you told me about your senior project.
It's on the Atlantic coast.
Alright, so I won't lie, I'm not as well versed in the Atlantic Coast Pipeline as I am in Keystone, but to my understanding it's a natural gas pipeline running along the Atlantic seaboard. I think it cuts through the southwestern portion of Virginia into North Carolina. That currently is up for debate. I think Trump is making some serious efforts to push it through legislation.
It's racking up in West Virginia that's being transported through Virginia down to North Carolina.
I don't know much about it, to be honest with you.
Next to nothing, but I want to know more.
Two of my friends and I headed to Nelson County, an area heavily affected by the pipeline, to get some personal responses. We were surprised with the avid interest that many people took in my project and all of the support we garnered. We even found ourselves explaining the issues to interested tourists in the area. I met with Thomas Hadwin, a concerned citizen with a background in gas and other public utilities, as well as Tom Fenton, a local business owner with a lot to lose. Citizens' anger regarding the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline is clear through the protest signs on the road all along the county. The beauty and natural appeal of Nelson County is something many are seeking to preserve from the construction of the pipeline. Though this is a definite concern, Aaron Ruby has provided me with some projections of what some of the land would look like with the pipeline. This is the current road right near the entrance to Wintergreen. This is what it would look like during construction. And this is what it would look like after the regrowth and healing process. Dominion is attempting to make this pipeline as little of an eyesore as possible. The Fenton Inn is a completely hand-built Bavarian-style inn in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It is meant to be a quiet getaway to enjoy the peace and tranquility as well as the beauty of the area. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline will be built on the property extremely close to the inn and ruin the natural atmosphere of the intended getaway site. All in all, how long has this entire project of building this taken you?
The
Fenton.
Fenton Inn?
Mm-hmm.
So I spent 4 years. We've been open for less than a year now. So we spent 4 years doing everything. I have a bulldozer and cut all the trees, milled them on site, made the doors, all the doors from everything on the wood on site. I did all this environmental stuff to protect the Chesapeake Bay by having my alternative septic system, which has a nitrogen removal swamp, basically a mini tidal swamp. It's basically a small swimming pool that rises and lowers and plants remove the nitrogen from the water. And then because we live in Virginia, we don't really need the water. We have plenty of well water, so we make drinkable water and throw it away, which is perfectly acceptable for me. I just didn't want to have to cut down a large area of trees to do a traditional septic system. So I keep basically just trying to cut the trees that were in the footprint of the building. And that's amazing. So the trees had to travel too far for their doors that they're in. So that's how long I've been sort of in this area.
So this is a hard question to ask.
Okay.
But
It's no hard question.
how do you think business will be affected by the pipeline?
Well, we understand that having noise, which I mean the pipeline spot, there's a sign and a telephone pole right along the road now.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I guess the tunnel entrance or exit, depending on what you want to feel like you're at the beginning or the end of this route. I don't know, but one of the tunnel, we'll call it an orifice for lack of. The tunnel opening is over there, and that's right, within very close earshot. Of course, blasting, drilling, all the trucks, it's going to be loud. And people come out here from Virginia Beach, they come out here from Northern Virginia, we get a lot of people from Norfolk, and they comment how quiet it is and how peaceful it is. They usually come from stressful environments where they have to fight with tunnel traffic and whatever bureaucratic employment they're in, and they come out here for a few days, drink wine in local wineries and drink beer in local breweries and hang out and change their face from this angry, city face to everything's great. It's sort of a recharge place for people.
In early 2017, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, who are tasked with overseeing the implementation of the pipeline, had a series of listening sessions for citizens to discuss their support or problems with the pipeline. The issue is, no one from FERC actually came. They sent court reporters to take down statements to be looked at later. Many citizens felt as though it prevented their voices from truly being heard, because the representatives may or may not have read the statements later. So, I know you were at the FERC meeting the other night.
Right.
We went to one in Suffolk a week ago. And I don't think we realized until we got there that there weren't actually FERC representatives there. It was just court reporters taking information.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that as opposed to actually having FERC representatives there?
Well, there were a few people there to administer it, but no one really to talk to and to respond. I've been involved in lots of large utility projects at both the state and federal level, and there was always plenty of opportunity for information interchange with the public. FERC is different. I've never been part of a process like this where they took you to a little room and you just had 3 minutes to say your piece. And one intriguing thing, all the other things that I've done, there's always been an evidentiary kind of process where there's an administrative law judge, witnesses can be cross-examined, you can ask questions to the applicant and they have to respond to that. This process for gas pipelines is just a paper exchange. Is the applicant says this is what we want to do and describes the impact, people ask questions, and then it's supposed to go into a draft environmental impact statement and on down the line. But the questions aren't being answered in the draft EIS. That's unlike anything I've ever experienced. Now I experienced it from the applicant side, right? A big utility saying we want to build a power plant or transmission line or whatever. But we were always expected to be very forthright in our answers. And if we weren't, the public had a chance to ask us questions and we had to respond. Or the regulator would say, well, you still are missing this information. The FERC doesn't operate like that.
Pipeline! No! Pipeline! No! Pipeline! No! Pipeline! No! Pipeline! No! Pipeline! No! Pipeline!
Can I have your attention, please? My name is Tom Ellis. I just went in there and testified to the machine like everybody else. First of all, I want to reiterate the fact that this whole thing is a fraud and you know it.
Yeah!
Public hearing or anything even faintly resembling a public hearing. This is basically suppression of dissent that we're seeing here. Because of that, I gained permission from them. I was a good boy because I didn't feel like getting thrown out. To read what I said to them aloud to you so that all of you could hear what I had to say to them, which was my original intent, to share with my fellow citizens my concerns. Now, most of you probably know all of this already, but please bear with me while I read my letter. Do you mind?
Nope. No.
Okay. Come on with me. My name is Thomas Ellis. I'm a professor at Tidewater Community College. I live in Hampton. I'm here tonight as a concerned citizen to register my opposition to the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline because this project is unnecessary, environmentally unsafe, economically unsound, and unwise in the long term. Allow me to elaborate. The project is unnecessary because the draft EIS fails to assess the need for this new 554-mile pipeline given the availability of existing pipeline capacity. It is unsafe because the draft EIS fails to analyze both the damage from construction and the potential dangers from leakage or rupture along the pipeline route. This project could cause irreparable damage to wetlands, creeks, forests, and farmland, including the Great Dismal Swamp National Wildlife Refuge right next to us here. More specifically, it fails to protect citizens and the environment from the proven hazard of building the pipeline in karst terrain, karst limestone terrain, which is prone to sinkholes. Finally, the project is environmentally unsound. The draft EIS does not provide a full account of the harmful economic consequences for communities through decreased property values, loss of tourism and ecosystem services, increased risk of groundwater contamination, and other factors. Besides these deficiencies, the project is also unwise because the draft EIS utterly fails to take into account the long-term consequences of the increased dependence on fossil fuels and the fracking that will inevitably result from investment in such a massive and destructive project. In particular, it fails to acknowledge that the pipeline would expand fracking and generate more than 42 million tons of greenhouse gases every year. Given the overwhelming evidence of harm the Atlantic Coast Pipeline would inflict on our region, the proposed project is not in the public interest.
Unfortunately, much of the footage was unusable because of the loud nature of the meeting. Even so, we got footage from many citizens who were both passionately for and against the pipeline. They had come to the FERC meeting to voice their concerns. One of the most pressing concerns is the environment. It has been empirically shown that pipelines adversely affect the environment via degradation of soil, vegetation, and landscapes. In an interview with Miss Joan Grimes, a teacher of environmental studies at First Colonial High School, it became clear that pipelines are specifically damaging in their fracturing of the environment. Fracturing occurs when an environment is split by some sort of infrastructure, like a pipeline or large road. It leaves the area devoid of vegetation and takes away much of the habitat of animals. It is so harmful because it often separates parts of a population and can cause problems with erosion and sediment later down the road because it strips that piece of land of the vegetation that holds all of the soil in place. Ms. Grimes claims that there is no way of telling the true impact of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline until a proper environmental impact statement is completed, and even then, there is no accounting for the degradation that is heeded by construction.
And do you think that the draft environmental impact statement covers all of the concerns that people might have with the pipeline?
I do. I mean, I've been doing this, quite some time. I've seen a lot of projects like this over the years. And we've got some veterans in our company who've been doing this for 30, 40 years. This is by far the most thorough and exhaustive environmental review of a project like this that we have ever seen. So we are a little more than 2 years into a 3-year federal permitting process. We have submitted more than 100,000 pages of reports and documentation to the federal agencies that are overseeing the permitting process. There have been more than 35,000 public comments that have been submitted to the agencies. There have been dozens of public meetings. Ourselves as a company, we have, in order to choose what originally was about a 550-mile route, we evaluated 6,000 miles of potential routes in order to choose what we believed was the best route, the safest route, the route with the least environmental impacts. Even after we chose that route, we've made more than 300 adjustments to the route to avoid environmentally sensitive areas, to avoid cultural and historic resources, and also to address concerns expressed by individual landowners.
The draft environmental impact statement is supposed to follow the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, passed decades ago, and is sort of the set of rules by which every lead federal agency that's regulating a project that could have some environmental impact, they're supposed to follow those guidelines. One of the first and foremost of those guidelines is a thorough examination of the need for a project and its alternatives. And we would write pages and pages describing why this project needed to be built and what are the options we considered. And in the DEIS for the ACP, there's a few paragraphs. And because the DEIS is the only place that the public can respond, if information's not in there, the public has nothing to respond to.
I think that the entire Shenandoah Valley should be nervous to have this pipeline go in, because when they drain these wells drain out very quickly. Mm-hmm. They're finding that, so that's why they're constantly having to get new permits to put in new wells. Mm-hmm. They don't last as long as they were built to, so they're constantly having to re-drill in new spots all over West Virginia and Ohio and Pennsylvania, and there's areas that are just completely destroyed by fracking. We've had, I think, when you start reading these subjects, you start seeing people in other parts of the country, they frack in Colorado and Texas and Oklahoma, they get earthquakes, they get poisoned water, all these different things are going on, and that's a byproduct of our energy usage.
That's an issue people are not paying much attention to. Mm-hmm. But if the natural gas build-out proceeds the way it's being proposed right now, by 2040, which is sort of that crucial target date, that the natural gas, that the greenhouse gases produced by all this gas production will be greater than what our targets are for 2040. Meaning we couldn't burn any coal at all, we couldn't use any oil for transportation at all. Just the natural gas portion will exceed our climate change targets. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking on the environmental side, this is a bad policy in the long run too.
While developing the pipeline is a major Dominion project, they wish to make it known that they are developing the use of renewable energy as well.
In terms of the environmental benefits of the project, something people often overlook is that companies like Dominion, companies like Duke Electric Utilities, we are making more investments into renewable technologies like wind and solar. And that's incredibly important because they have a very low environmental footprint. And so we want to be transitioning towards cleaner sources of energy, and we're making major investments in that. In fact, Dominion in just the last 3 or 4 years has invested almost $1 billion in solar facilities in Virginia. Duke Energy just over $1 billion in solar facilities in North Carolina. But as we know, solar power basically only produces electricity when the sun is shining, when there's enough sun to generate the electricity. And best case scenario, that's about 20 or 30% of the time. So if we're going to continue making investments in solar and using more solar energy, we've got to have a reliable source of backup power that is capable of producing electricity around the clock, not just when the sun is shining. And that's natural gas. Natural gas has the great benefit of being an incredibly flexible fuel, meaning when it's able to respond very quickly to real-time changes in demand on the grid. So if all of a sudden the sun goes behind the clouds and your solar facilities aren't generating electricity, you can very quickly power up and then power down a natural gas plant in order to meet that, to make up what's lost when those solar facilities come offline.
There is some controversy regarding whether the pipeline is actually necessary or whether existing infrastructure can meet rising demands. The existing infrastructure is known as the Transco pipeline, and how much of the East Coast gets their gas.
So my first thing was, well, do we really need it? Because when I was permitting multi-billion-dollar utility projects in New York, that was really the first question. Is this project necessary? If it's not, you don't really go on to the next stages. And that's something that the FERC doesn't pay a lot of attention to. They pay attention to whether there's a contract to move the gas or not. But all of the companies that are building pipelines nowadays, for most of them, the customers are their own subsidiaries. And that's certainly the case for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and the Mountain Valley Pipeline. They're the same companies owned by the same companies that are building the pipeline. And FERC says we shouldn't consider that as an indication for market need, but that's all they've ever considered. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we're asking is really assess whether this is required. Because there's a pipeline corridor called the Transco corridor that goes from the Gulf Coast all the way up the East Coast to New York City. Has at least 4 pipelines in it. It's been around since the 1950s. And it has 3 to 4 times the available capacity in it than what the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is going to provide. And you've probably heard about Marcellus by now, right? Okay, so it's this big gas production zone, mostly in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And there's so much gas now, they can directly supply the Northeast. And by doing that, about half the capacity of that system is now available to move gas down to Virginia and North Carolina, all the way to Alabama, actually. So that's why I say the pipeline is not needed. There's plenty of capacity already in the ground in existing pipelines.
How do you think that the Atlantic Coast Pipeline will augment this, the area better than using Transco?
Well, so there are 2 electric utility customers, Dominion Virginia Power and Duke Energy. They are either 100% or 90% reliant on Transco for fueling all of their electric power fleets. So Duke Energy in North Carolina, they're the largest electric utility in the state, they're 100% dependent on the Transco line. It's the only it's the only natural gas transmission pipeline in the entire state. It's geographically located in the western part of the state. And so what it has done is it has been inaccessible to a lot of communities in eastern North Carolina for electricity, but also more for industrial power that I talked about to be able to support economic development. And so that's actually the very reason why we're building the Atlantic Coast Pipeline in the eastern part of the state. So a lot of those communities who have not been able to have not had access to natural gas are able to have access to it, so they can attract industry manufacturing, jobs to their community. You look at the state of North Carolina, most of the development and economic growth that's occurred over the last several decades has occurred in the western part of the state, Charlotte, and those areas. A lot of the eastern part of the state, east of the 95 corridor, has not seen that same level of growth and those same opportunities. And a large part of it is because they don't have the natural gas infrastructure in place to do that. In Virginia, Dominion Virginia Power is 90% reliant on Transco. So if you think about it, if you're a public utility that's responsible for providing electricity to millions of people around the clock, it makes sense that you would want to have a diverse supply of fuel to power your plants. You want to have redundancy. That way, if one source of natural gas that feeds in your plants, if that gets disrupted because of weather or because of damage to the pipe or repairs to the pipe, you want to be able to have an alternate source. That's what the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is.
One of the major concerns that citizens have is that of private property. People are concerned with what is called eminent domain. This is the government's ability to take private land for public projects with just compensation. Dominion has even taken people to court for the right to survey their land on several occasions regarding the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. This issue was quite controversial, especially for this project.
But on one side, a woman's land that had been in their family for at least 4 generations will be completely lost to the dwelling area. And as it's coming through on this side, there are some sensitive species and sensitive habitats that will just be wiped out. Not to say you've now got a pipeline coming right across the entrance to Winterberg, where hundreds of thousands of people live. And unfortunately, it's not clear why, but the pipelines built in the last 10 years are having more leaks and accidents than pipelines that are over 50 and 60 years old. So there's a real concern for safety for people that are getting cut off. Their conservation areas are getting cut off. But certainly the land and water and the communities. A lot of the communities here are very dependent upon tourism, and permanent jobs will be lost. Tourism income will be lost. Tax revenues will be lost. Even though the pipeline will contribute taxes, in many areas like this, the property values will go down even more than that, so that the total tax revenues for the counties will be less than what they would have been without the pipeline.
One of the biggest concerns of taxpayers is how much this pipeline is going to cost. Aaron Ruby and Thomas Hadwin have two very different opinions on the projected costs for this region.
So how much is the total construction of the pipeline and maintenance of the pipeline going to cost?
So this is a $5 to $5.5 billion project. It's a very big project. In fact, it's one of the biggest infrastructure projects we've built in Virginia in many years, and it certainly is the largest infrastructure project being proposed in North Carolina right now. So you've got $5 to $5.5 billion over a 2-year period. It's going to create 17,000 construction jobs over a 2-year period, which is significant. And these aren't just any jobs. These are highly skilled, highly trained, good-paying jobs. Welders, machinists, equipment operators, pipe fitters. These are folks that make $25, $30, $50 an hour, some even more than that. I mean, so these are good middle-class jobs that you can support a family on. And so that's 17,000 of those new jobs over a 2-year period. It's going to generate $2.7 billion in economic activity. It's a big number. People gloss over it pretty easily, but it's extremely significant.
Is not only is electricity use flat, but energy efficiency and renewables are undercutting the price of gas-fired power plants, which is a good thing because those are clean sources of energy, right? They're going to get cheaper every year. Every 5 years, the cost of a renewable goes down by half for building a new one. Okay? While the gas plants, because the fuel costs are going to increase, just keep getting more and more and more expensive. So for you all, as young people, you're saying, wait a minute, do I want to go into a world that has an increasing energy cost scenario no matter what I do, my family, my businesses are going to have to pay more for energy, which is quite opposite of what the policies are. Boy, if we build more natural gas, if we build all these things, people will have more jobs and we'll have lower cost energy. The outcome will be exactly opposite of what the policy makers are saying. So that's one of the things we told the city. And also the fact that the jobs won't be created that way. Actually, solar is the fastest growing job category in the United States, and the most jobs will be created by energy efficiency. Over 2 million jobs by 2050 using energy efficiency. So we have this clash of policies here. One says we want money now. Let's build it right now. Worry about paying for it later. Well, but it's going to be you all, the young people, that'll have to pay for it later. Instead of letting the renewables and the energy efficiency make life cheaper for us.
So what do you think the average citizen can do to voice their concern and kind of let our representatives know what we think about it?
I think first they need to be more aware. Most people have just read the newspapers, which says we absolutely need this. It's going to save us a lot of money and create a lot of jobs. And that sounds very soothing. It's coming from what most people consider a respected source, a power company that they trust. One of the real disconnects here is people are served by a company called Dominion Virginia Power. That's a utility company. They're our friends and neighbors, and they're good people and they do a good job. But they are owned by a company called Dominion Resources. And it's Dominion Resources that is building this pipeline. They are not a regulated utility. They are just a business that exists to make money like every other big corporation. Okay? So the information, since it's Dominion, most people just say Dominion, they don't know that you're not talking about the utility, you're talking about the holding company. Okay, so that's one point of information. And they need to be aware that what they've been told in the newspapers and in the booklets that have been sent out, I mean, it's a big company, they're excellent at public relations. Okay? And most people take it at face value. And they haven't heard that it's not necessary in order for us to have enough gas, because most people say, hey, we need to have enough energy. That's how our economy has always grown and things like that. And when they're told we have to have it in order to have enough, they accept that. They haven't heard the other story as we can have enough without it. They've been told that we'll save money. They haven't heard the other story that it's going to cost them a lot more. Okay, so it's a matter of education, of getting the story out and then letting the people decide. They should talk to their local representatives, their delegates, their senators at the state level. Unfortunately, and this disillusioned me coming from another state. I don't know what it means to young people today, but Dominion has no laws about contribution limits to candidates. Dominion is the first, for nearly everybody, but at least the second largest contributor for every person in the General Assembly, Republican or Democrat. So it's not really a democratic process about saying what's best for the people of Virginia. It's sort of what's best for our large corporations. And I've been in utilities. I think there's no reason why what's good for utilities shouldn't be good for the people of the state. Mm-hmm. You give them a monopoly in exchange for good service. And that's certainly possible here in Virginia, but that's not the direction we're headed right now.
And I think that's one of the main reasons we wanted to do this documentary was to get out information in a way that's affordable and contextualize this issue for people. It's not something far away. It's not something that's one-sided, and there are a lot of people who are concerned about it.
Right. Just because it's not in your backyard, this project will affect people throughout the state. Mm-hmm. People down in Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, they're saying we need this pipeline in order to have economic development. But the way they're looking at economic development is the old 20th century model. They want to build a fertilizer plant and export the natural gas basically as fertilizer, or they want other types of plants that might turn that material into something else. And really, the jobs would come, as I said, from energy efficiency and the other new energy technologies. That could provide thousands of jobs for southeastern Virginia.
While the main goal of this project was the production of the documentary, I found that along the way I have been fostering education in the community. Not only has this been an experience of teaching, but also learning. In doing this project, I have been introduced to a number of diverse viewpoints, and hopefully was able to capture them here. In talking to teachers and classmates about my project, I have helped to enlighten them about a topic that has flown under the radar for far too long. Every movement starts with a discussion, a picture, an idea. Never be complacent about the issues that matter to you. Change comes from us. I would like to thank my community for standing behind me in this endeavor. Stand up, stand out, and never stop making a difference.